Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football fans across the nation and around the world. This is Tim May with yet another Tim May podcast. And kind of reacting on the fly right here, ladies and gentlemen. I had recorded an earlier podcast, Truth in Podcasting here. But, that thing is definitely dated considering what happened on Monday in the state of Ohio when the governor of the state of Ohio, Mike DeWines, signed an executive order which authorizes student athletes in colleges throughout the state to take advantage of name, image, and likeness rights to be able to capitalize financially, et cetera, on something that I've always thought all along they should have had the right to in the first place. But you know what? Me thinking that and knowing legally how things stand are two different things. That's why I'm bringing in one of my favorite recurring guests, Luke Fedlam, attorney Luke Fedlam from Ohio, from Columbus. Luke, welcome back to the Tim May podcast.
Hey, Tim, thanks so much, man. And listen, for all your listeners out there, I got to say, the fact that you had to re-record this podcast, I'm with you. There has been so much changing hour by hour almost that, there's a lot going on. So I'm glad we could be on together and talk about it.
Well, real quick, what was just your first reaction to the governor, Mike DeWine, taking the bull by the horns? Obviously, Niraj Antani, a state senator, introduced legislation 31 days ago or so. And as we speak here now, that was going to lead to this. But then it gets to the House. After it gets passed by the state Senate, it gets to the House of Representatives of the state. And suddenly there's an addendum attached to it, which really didn't go along with what the first thing was all about. Plus, they took away the emergency declaration, which would have meant like a 90-day moratorium before it could go into effect. The governor just basically understood the situation from a competitive standpoint for Ohio State and other major colleges in the state and signed the executive order. What was just your reaction to all of that and how it took place?
Yeah, well, I mean, my reaction, I think, to what the governor did was, it was very much needed. I think what he did was he took, a look at what the Kentucky governor did as well, making name, image, and likeness an executive order. Governor DeWine did the same thing, which allows him to, have this authorization now for student athletes to be able to earn money off of their name, image, and likeness, like other states, that are going into effect, on July 1st. And we just saw, the D1 Council also has, kind of finally approved, right, this name, image, and likeness opportunities as well. So the Board of Governors will be voting on that. So, I mean, again, to my point earlier, so much going on at breakneck speed. I guess I'll say that just at least over the last, kind of month or so. But what the governor did was necessary in order for schools in the state of Ohio not to be at a competitive disadvantage versus what's going on in other states.
What would be your advice? And I say that because you will be giving this advice to Ohio State athletes through this anomaly group that you've started, and you guys are basically been authorized to advise, for one of another term, right, Ohio State athletes. And you're probably hooking up with some other schools, I would think, in the state as this goes along. But what would be your first word of advice to these student athletes who want to take advantage of the situation? They're there. I guess that's I was going to go on and on, but that's the way I do sometimes my questions, is just get right to the answer.
Yeah. So I'll tell you this. I think more than advise, it's really educate, right? And it's this idea of how can we make sure that student athletes are educated on what is coming their way. I've worked with professional athletes for over 15 years. I have seen when, the first time that they've ever seen a marketing agreement or an agent, marketing agent agreement of somebody that wants to represent them in their marketing deals. And most student athletes have never seen it before, right? And so it's this idea of, if you were to ask me what's the first advice that I would give, the first advice I would give is make sure you understand everything that you are being asked to sign before you sign it, right? Don't sign anything until you understand fully the impact that it has on you, your future, your brand, et cetera. And then the next piece is on the financial piece, right? Which is understanding the impact of everything financially, taxes, right? So we're going to educate and talk to student athletes about understanding, the impact of taxes, because now you're getting paid in gross. So what does that even mean? And how do you have to set money aside for the tax man that never forgets your house? He comes, naughty or nice, he'll be there,
and he'll find you if you've moved. But go ahead.
Yes, he'll find you. So we really want to take these real world practical issues that will face student athletes and educate them so that they can at least slow things down and know what they're getting into and be able to make informed and educated decisions.
What will be the immediate biggest benefit, do you think, for student athletes? And, that's kind of a 10 million question, because every athlete's going to be different. Every opportunities are going to be different. But what do you think will be the immediate benefit? Will the stars, stars on the Ohio State football team, which I keep going back to, which is my biggest expertise, can they expect to immediately benefit from this? I mean, financially, what's your feel for that?
Immediately. There's no question, Tim. Immediately. And I'm not talking just about Ohio State, student athletes across the country, especially for student athletes who are elite performers and have that marketability already because of their performance and their celebrity status as an athlete. There are already student athletes who will be signing deals this week, right? So looking at July 1st coming on Thursday, we're going to see that happen. I think what we're also going to see, though, is the broader impact of name, image, and likeness. The concept that all student athletes can now earn compensation off their name, image, and likeness and beyond their entrepreneurial endeavors, running, being involved in camps and clinics, doing more, business startup, whatever it might be. We'll see that play out over time as student athletes get comfortable with their brand and how they want to engage in name, image, and likeness. But from a pure elite athlete, sports management type of opportunities, marketing opportunities, that will happen right away. And we'll see it right away.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you, what's the most immediate problem they're going to face? And I think as you pointed out earlier, keep your receipts, make sure you understand how much you're getting paid, how much you're going to owe the tax man when he comes knocking. But past that, there are going to be unscrupulous characters who are going to try to take advantage of these situations, correct? I'm talking about, from maybe the agent realm, or even business owners and stuff, whoever. I'm talking about from the financial aspect of things. What should an athlete really look out for in that regard? And should every athlete who wants to take advantage of name, image, and likeness have some type of legal counsel?
So you kind of threw me this softball here, right? Which would be like, hey, of course, yes, they should have legal counsel. Call me. My name is Luke Fedlam. You can look me up, right?
My name is Luke. They call me Luke. Go ahead.
Right. So in certain instances, yes. In certain instances, student athletes, there are going to be some who will need legal representation because of just the dollar amount of the opportunities that will present themselves. To say that you're going to hire a lawyer, to do a $500 appearance somewhere probably doesn't make that much, sense from a cost benefit analysis. But there are going to be athletes who are going to have significant opportunities, and yes, they should have legal counsel representing them. But I think even beyond that, there's going to be a big component, and I keep going back to this, Tim. It's education. We have got to provide this real world practical education to student athletes. Ohio State and other schools have done a great job of financial literacy kind of programming and training over the years, of bringing in kind of other folks from the community and talking to student athletes. I've been fortunate to be a part of that quite a bit over the past. But now it's much different, because now we're not just talking about, a few $100s, maybe $1,000 that they have, left over on their stipend, after they pay their bills and things like that. Now we're talking about the possibility of significant assets. And because of that, we know that unscrupulous kind of, bad actors, third parties, whatever you want to call them, they may come in and want to take advantage of student athletes across the country, just because wherever money goes, unscrupulous people follow. And I think the education will help with that, even if it's just for a student athlete to recognize this person might be trying to take advantage of me. Like, I need to be more skeptical. I like to tell, clients and others all the time, like, I am super skeptical of everyone in this sports space. And I encourage athletes in particular to be skeptical as well, and use a team of advisors, use others that you trust to help vet these opportunities, because someone will make an opportunity sound like it's the best thing ever and that they're going to put all this money in your pocket. But then what happens if now they want to say, okay, well, we're taking pictures while you're at this event and we're going to pay you for coming to the event, but now we're going to own all the pictures that we took and we can use them in marketing forever and you're not getting paid for it. Those are the kind of things that we want to help educate them to look out for so that they don't get taken advantage of.
Yeah, that's why I brought up the lawyer aspect of things, somebody to read the actual fine print, because there will be a tendency to not read the fine print, just see the dollar amount on the side of the thing. And, you don't want to sign a contract as a freshman at Ohio State that, like you said, what's the word, commits you to that entity for the rest of your playing career, because which there will be some fine print slid into that. What kind of whirlpool do you expect? Do you expect it to be really rapid at first and then smooth out? We've talked about that on previous podcasts with you, but what's your take on that?
Listen, I think the next 6 months to 18 months, it's going to just be crazy. And that's because the market has to figure itself out, right? This is it's a new market, new opportunities, new players who are entering the space all the time. I think we're going to see consolidation of a lot of different companies that are engaged in this space. But I think over time it will settle out. But I think this first year, 2 years, it's going to be there's going to be a lot going on. And my hope and the work that I'm focused on is making sure that athletes aren't on the negative side of this thing where, that they're protected and that they're not taken advantage of, from people who want to enter into this space.
And speaking of taking advantage of or things, what you and I have been talking about this for 18 months at least, are you worried that some of these bills, these bills are fairly terse succinct for one of another term, but do you worry that there's been a lot of hurry up just to get these things passed? I'm talking about in different states, obviously the executive order in the state of Ohio. How many have gotten it right? Because I know you've looked at some of these other bills, but especially Ohio. Do you feel like Ohio has gotten it right? And as Niraj Antani said, maybe by the end of this week, they might have a real piece of legislation passed about this thing. But it was important to get it done before July 1. But are you worried about some of these bills not going far enough, or just what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing from states right now is that they want to get something passed or an executive order enacted because they don't want to fall behind other states.
Right.
And so for them to be very succinct and direct is what needs to happen. Obviously, Ohio's proposed legislation was pretty succinct and direct. And then you add an amendment that has nothing to do directly with the matter at hand. And that causes everything to slow down. Right. So they kind of have to be succinct to be able to work through the legislative process. But what I think we're going to see, my prognostication, you can have me on in a few months, 6 months or so, and I can tell you that I was right.
I can throw tomatoes at you, or I can throw tomatoes at you. Now go ahead.
All right, one of the two. I think we're going to see federal legislation that will go into place that will supersede what we see at the state level, that will really take on name, image, and likeness broadly, and that it will have all of the detail that we need. It will have what the oversight process is, because we haven't seen that in state legislation, right?
Correct.
Who's actually responsible in overseeing this, and because of the way it's being enacted state by state, it's going to have to be, the schools themselves, right? And then providing that back. So I think there's a lot more to come. I think that what we're going to see is that from a federal legislative perspective, and I think that's going to happen, I think, before the end of the year.
I've asked you this before on my podcast, and I'm going to get you to reiterate it. Is it crazy to a certain extent that you have to have a law that says player A can take advantage of his name, image, and likeness, that he can benefit from it financially, that has to supersede NCAA and other rules that forbid that? I mean, how it just seems like it never needed to get to this. And how crazy is it that there has to be a law to say that, let's say Cardale Jones was on this team. He was part and parcel to the announcement about this, but that he would be able to take advantage financially from helping his team win the national championship way back. You understand what I'm saying? Is that odd to you, I guess?
Tim, it's crazy. Right? I mean, that's just kind of the bottom line. But it's crazy when we take the step back and think about it, right? If you would have had this same conversation 5 years ago, it would be crazy to think that we would consider federal legislation, state laws around allowing student athletes to be compensated, because we have been so ingrained since the early 1950s when they started offering, athletic scholarships to students, that, amateurism and all of this is tied up in all you get is your scholarship, right? And no more. And we don't want bad actors and all this. So that's been the narrative for 70 years. But when you think about it and you take a step back, it's like, they're not asking for this conversation around name, image, and likeness is not about being paid to play your sport. It's about you having the opportunity to contract with another company, a third party, to earn money off of the platform that you've built, the brand that you've built. So I understand we need guardrails and we need protection. And yes, we do need legislation, whether it's state or federal, to ultimately help make sure that student athletes are protected. But this whole concept that we're going through all this, it really is, when you take a step back, kind of mind blowing.
I know it says La Croix on the side of this can, but it's actually a can of worms. Okay. Because, the bottom line is the NCAA is almost sneaking out the back door here from the standpoint, like you just said, compensation, but that's going to come up. That is coming up. I mean, the ability to possibly unionize and things like that, that's coming up, because the third string, and no offense to the third string left guard is not going to have the same opportunities to capitalize financially as a starting quarterback is, or a starting wide receiver. And that doesn't, like you just said, this does not address the idea that these guys are working much more than overtime to help generate billions of dollars across the board for their schools and basically conferences, et cetera, from the TV contracts, et cetera. That's, no matter what has happened up until now, that's going to be visited, right? I mean, that you're going to be able to earn over and above what you're getting now, which is cost of going to school, scholarship, et cetera. There's a good chance that big time college football players and basketball players are going to get some type of, for want of a term, minimum wage, right? I mean, that has to be coming down the road.
There's a lot of conversation about what that looks like. There's been proposed legislation around allowing or authorizing student athletes to unionize. There's, obviously there's been conversation about pay for play over the years and things. So will those topics continue to be revisited? I think so. Yes. I think that what's going to be a very good bellwether for all of this is whatever federal legislation gets passed on name, image, and likeness, that's going to let us know how far this all is going to, kind of proceed. Because, there are, definitely different factions. Imagine that, right? Within Congress, looking at this very differently. Some saying, hey, student athletes should have the right for revenue sharing, for, unionization, for all of give them everything, right? And then others that are like, well, we need to protect the sanctity of what amateurism is, or what college sports are, and what the NCAA has, and all that. So somewhere in there, right, is in that spectrum is going to be what we see. And I think what comes out from Congress when that time comes, hopefully, within the coming months, what comes out of Congress is, I think, going to be a big key to what we're going to continue to see and how far down this slope we're going to continue to go. Yeah, as
Austin Ward and I talk about a lot of times, though, be careful what you wish for athletically, because Title IX is going to drive a lot of this. There are going to be schools, even in the Big Ten, schools aren't equal. There's a huge difference between Ohio State and Washington State. There's a ridiculous difference between Ohio State and Ohio from a revenue generating standpoint. And, just because Ohio State can afford it or Alabama can afford it doesn't mean, that Boise State or whomever can afford it, right? I mean, there's a reckoning coming, I guess, is what we're talking about, right?
Well, there is, right? Because it ultimately there has to be a balance. Because if we want to see this idea of, schools having sports, just having all of the sports that they have, there's going to have to be a balance in all of this. This idea of, all student athletes should be paid by whom, right? By the conferences, by the school, by the NCAA itself. And I get it. I know people talk about the NCAA makes, billions of dollars on their television contract. And I'm not one that often jumps to the defense of the NCAA in this, but yet they distribute out a lot of money that they get to schools already. And yes. So the question with student athletes just getting paid, to your point, yes, there's going to have to be a conversation around, the balancing that, and because some schools just aren't going to be able to do it. But that cannot be confused with name, image, and likeness. That Correct. Is an entirely separate conversation that you can invite me back on to talk about, because with name, image, and likeness in particular, sometimes that does get confusing where people think like that it's the school that's paying these student athletes. And so by Ohio, having this executive order that all of a sudden now the schools in Ohio are going to pay the student athletes. And that is not the case. It is absolutely just giving student athletes the right that their other student, non-athlete counterparts at the same school have, and they've had forever, right? Which is they can go out and, make money off of, whatever business they want to start or whatever kind of, gigs they can get. And now student athletes will be able to do that too.
Hey, last thing, Luke, Luke Fedlam, one of my favorite people. Do schools at this moment, will they need to tread lightly when it comes to censoring or, for another term, line item vetoing? If a kid comes and says, I've got a deal with XYZ company, and the school doesn't necessarily like that company, or it's, you understand what I'm saying, or it's in competition with one of their own, how should schools, just give me a little bit of legal advice here. How should schools tread at this moment in time in the beginning stages of this name, image, and likeness situation when it comes to perusing what these student athletes will bring in front of them?
Well, I'm not going to give you legal advice formally, but what I will give you is just kind of my perspective, right, on what we've seen and what the impact this could have on the industry just generally and on schools, right? And that is, I think initially we're going to see situations where schools are going to want to see if a student athlete, if they have a contract that's in conflict with a school sponsorship agreement, that the school having the right to veto that, if you will, for lack of a better term, or reject.
That was the word. Yeah, that was the word. Yeah.
But I think what we'll see in the flip side is that's because this is right now, right? A year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years, 5 years, whatever, as schools are renegotiating those agreements with big brands, Adidas, Nike, other, beverages, et cetera. It'll be interesting to see how those companies create or draft potential sponsorship agreements with schools now that name, image, and likeness has become a thing. So does a Nike or does a Coca-Cola, renegotiate a different type of deal because they want to divert some of their money directly to the student athletes? Or, what does that look like in those types of negotiations as name, image, and likeness becomes more settled and more evolved? And at the same time, schools are in that, they've termed out of those agreements and they're renegotiating those agreements with those entities. That's, I think, going to be very interesting to see how that plays out over time.
Can I ask you one other quickie? I know I said last thing, but that's my calling card. One last question.
Absolutely.
Let's say player A gets a deal with a shoe company in the next 2 weeks, but he's, for whatever reason, he's required to wear this other. He's required to wear shoe company X's brands when he plays, like for Ohio State, for example. I won't name the brands, whatever. Mm-hmm. Does he have the right to tape off the school's brand name? Maybe he won't have the right to wear his own shoe, but will he have the right to tape off the brand name of the shoe he's wearing for the school?
Yeah, the short answer to that, from my perspective, is no, right? Yeah. And the part of the reason why is because that would be a student athlete isn't going to be authorized to do things that are restricted by a school's agreement. So if a school says, hey, this is our particular apparel line brand that we have an agreement with. So all football related activities or all basketball related activities, all sports related activities, press conference, media day, performance on the field, all that kind of stuff, you have to wear this brand. Because that's a requirement as part of their performance on the team. They have a scholarship. They are on the team. They're signed to the school. There's going to be language in the agreement that the student athlete's going to get that will most likely say you have the authority to enter into this agreement. And so if that language says you have to wear this during press conferences or on the field and just tape it up and everything, the student athlete doesn't have the authority to enter into that agreement. So I think Will there potentially be some case that we see where that comes up? Probably. But I think what we're most likely going to see are schools saying to their student athletes, hey, if you're going to be in an agreement with a competitive brand or a brand that competes with whatever our sponsorships are, most likely they're going to say you can do that, but you can't do it in a way that conflicts with what your requirements are as part of the team. So using your example, if player A does have a competing shoe deal, it would be for their personal use. So when they're not doing, football or sports related activities, they could wear that particular brand and, promote it on social media and things like that. I think that's how we're going to see all of that aspect start to play out.
In other words, Nike's on Saturday and hush puppies when he's going to class, right? Hush puppies.
Something like that. Yeah.
Hush puppies. Let's do that out there. I already know they still make hush puppies. I like hush puppies with my fish, but that's another story. Luke Fedlam.
Because you're a North Carolina guy. Of course you like the hush puppies.
Oh, yeah, man.
Come on.
Yeah. But I tell you what, man, Luke Fedlam, thanks once again for joining the Tim May podcast, and there will be many more opportunities, man. I hope you take advantage of this name, image, and likeness opportunity.
Well, absolutely. I will. You know what? I will take advantage of it. I also have a podcast. It's called Protecting Your Possibilities. Feel free to come check it out. Tim, I'm going to have you on there as a guest where I can put you on the hot seat and ask you a bunch of questions and your perspectives as well.
Anytime. And I say that because you've got both my email and my cell number because I can't dodge you. But Luke Fedlam, once again, thanks for joining me, man. And ladies and gentlemen, until next week when something else, who knows what's going to bubble up in major college athletics in a week's time. It's crazy. It's like a volcano right now. But until next time, for Luke Fedlam, this is Tim May. We'll see you then.